Now, the #1 story of the week, change is coming for the federal workforce. More federal employees are getting vaccines, more paid leave may be coming, and more safety measures are in place, thanks to a White House task force. To review it all, Jessica Klement, Staff Vice President of Policy and Programs for the National Active and Retired Federal Employees Association, and Joanna Friedman, partner at the Federal Practice Group. Folks, welcome. Thanks for coming on. Jesse, I start with you. What do you think out of all of the things that have happened for the workforce this week are the most important to pay attention to?
Well, I think if we're talking about feds in the DC area, we probably need to take a close look at the telework situation in a snow event, right? We are used to the government closing and you don't have to go to work that day. Well, we've all been teleworking for almost a year now. So sorry, you have to work on a snow day now. I think it's something that a lot of us are experiencing, myself included. That was obviously the immediate thing. Also, reconciliation, what's moving through the House, possibly for consideration next week, and how that affects federal employees.
Joanna, welcome. It's good to have you back on the program. What do you think are the most important things for feds to watch as all of these things unfold?
Sure. I think there's a couple issues this week that really stood out to me. First, with the mask mandate that President Biden put into effect for all federal property, federal agencies are now empowered to actually take disciplinary action against federal employees who refuse to wear masks while they're at work. So that certainly will be an issue to look at in the coming future as more employees return back to work. There is some exciting news for federal employees. OPM issued guidance this week stating that all federal employees now have the right to be able to take up to 12 weeks of parental leave as long as they have essentially worked in their position consecutively for at least 1 year and the child was born on October 1st, 2020 or thereafter. So that's very exciting news for federal employees. And lastly, I think an issue for all of us to look at is whether agencies are going to be able to require employees to actually be vaccinated. They are now allowing federal employees to use 8 hours of administrative leave and sometimes even more if they are going to obtain the vaccine.
What do we know about what agencies can do, Joanna, both in the mask mandate, what's the teeth behind that, and the requiring or encouraging employees to get vaccinated?
Well, with the vaccine, the EEOC issued guidance back in December of last year that states that, in fact, an employer can require an employee to get vaccinated because it's not a violation of the American with Disabilities Act, since in doing so, it's not requiring an employee to disclose information about a medical condition. And so the law as it stands now is that an employer is going to be able to require an employee to get vaccinated. Certainly an employee will be able to request accommodation if they have a medical condition or perhaps a religious belief that precludes them from getting a vaccine.
Jesse, are your members telling you that they have any level of anxiety about what their bosses might make them or imply that they must do before they can come back to the office?
Not at this point, but I think we are all living in a time of heightened anxiety. And as agencies mandate masks and ask employees to get vaccinated, I certainly expect there will be some hesitation on many fronts because that's just what we're experiencing across the country.
Jesse, you mentioned the legislation that Congress is looking to move. What's in there that might mean something to the federal workforce?
Right now, the House Oversight and Reform Committee has approved its portion of the broader reconciliation bill. Francis, I often joke we can cover one piece of these segments in entire shows, and reconciliation is absolutely one of them. But this piece of the broader reconciliation bill would allow up to paid leave for 15 weeks for federal employees if they get COVID, if they have to quarantine, if they are home taking care of children who are virtually learning, or if they're a caretaker for a family member and the usual caretaker can't come because of COVID.
Joanna, from a legal perspective, the Justice Department has put out guidance essentially saying what it believes its managers can and can't do. What do you expect to see as far as the questions that employees might ask of their managers or the issues that they might have with guidance? I know we haven't seen the guidance in some cases, so it's hard to predict, but is there a way to try to anticipate, get out ahead of some of the mandates or requests or requirements that might be coming?
Yes, I think that if you're an employee that has a medical condition that either limits your ability to wear a mask all day and or puts you in a high risk category to have potential exposure to other people and you know, COVID in general, then you should be disclosing that information now and seeking accommodation, because oftentimes it takes you know, 30, 60, 90 days in order to get a reasonable accommodation or religious accommodation actually implemented.
What's the best process for going about that, both from the employee perspective and the manager's perspective? Are there any hurdles that that either side will have to go through, or is this the standard procedure that's existed over time?
Yeah, every agency has a process in place where typically there's perhaps a disability coordinator and or a designated HR official where you go to begin the process. And then there's what we call an interactive process between the agency and the employee, where you do have to disclose information pertaining your medical condition and or your religious belief. And then there will be some back and forth as to whether or not the agency is going to be able to implement an effective accommodation. And I think that's where the issue really lies, is we don't know exactly how that's going to shake out.
Joanna Friedman, Jessica Klement, thanks both very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Francis.